just a few words before we start about what XShare is about. That's quite an interesting project because it's halfway between innovation and implementation. It's clearly connected to the European Health Data Space for preparation. And we try to see in this project how to connect the European Electronic Health Record Exchange format with the different domains. So continuity of care, of course, but also public health and clinical research. So how can we better integrate all the ecosystem, and how can those formats, the one which have been documented in the regulation, can help in that. The project is also going a bit further because it tries also to see how the patient can become very much at the center with the implementation of a yellow button, which gives the citizen the possibility to activate structured and quality data and make them available for multiple purposes. So we would like today to see how we can better bridge the gap between primary and secondary use, which have been built since 2 decades in 2 complete different ecosystems. Sometimes there are very meager interactions, sometimes not. We will also try to tell you today what has been attempted up to now, trying to give a few examples that we have been trying to document in European countries who try to implement the so-called only one strategy. So basically, EHDS, the European Health Data Space, is first of all trying to provide a framework and a governance, of course, for health data use and reuse, by working on those 3 different aspects. Access, I just mentioned it, interoperability, and thus, as a consequence of it, data reuse by just avoiding the never-ending discussions on how the data and why and for what the data can be reused. So trying to have a framework to establish clear guidance and rules and procedures for it. So, as I told you, the EHRX files are really the cornerstone for this, and 6 domains have been identified, 6 type of content, I would say. You see them on the screen. I won't detail them now, but they will come back in the presentations. You need to know that with those 6 domains, we are already covering a very, very large number of data. And thus, there is here this possibility to consider a very large number of use cases. So we tried here to see how those data can be better connected with, as I said, public health and clinical research, and also to support new use cases, like, for example, real-time monitoring. How can we have more improved infection surveillance, improved quality and availability of data, and how can we make life of people simpler by simplifying their data input and avoiding that they need to duplicate their data all the time. So you see the prioritized use case that my colleague Eugenia will be documenting. So I don't go into details, they will present it, but that's the 3 ones that we have prioritized because that's also the European public health priorities. And that's also the ones which are today consuming the most data at European level. So let's immediately dig into the matter. So we have, first of all, 4 presentations to introduce the topic. I will shortly present one of them, but the first presenter will be Fidelia Cassini, who is a professor of public health at the University Cattolica Scuole in Italy. And she produced a very interesting book. It's more than a paper, it's a book. So with a lot of material, and she will give us the essence of her messages in this book, where she really tried to see what has been done in the past and what should be done to try to improve this connection between primary and secondary use. we have the chance to have with us two wonderful American ladies, Rebecca Cush and Rebecca Becker, who are both working to try to support the use of CDISC in clinical research, and also to see how we can better use this very important tool to better connect clinical research and, but as I said, not only clinical research, also public health with primary use of data and the HTLS5. And they will present us all the work they have been doing in trying to really see what we could already do with a slight adaptation of what is proposed in the format. And finally, Eugenia from Rinaldi from Charité in Berlin will present you the use cases we've been documenting.
Okay, so I would like to start with a very general presentation. I mean, an introductory presentation to the secondary use of electronic health data, and in particular to the different categories of health data that we could use to add value in our activities and to create this bridge between the primary and the secondary use. As Luc introduced, I published recently a book dedicated to this topic, because it is very important to have a picture of all the international best practices and activities ongoing regarding the secondary use of electronic health data, which are very interesting and very useful for the advancement of what we are building in Europe, which is the EU EHDS framework. And we can see that both the primary and the secondary use are synergetic to build this framework, and especially regarding the benefits that the secondary use can bring. We have to try to collect a lot, as much as possible, of electronic health data that we have. So just to show you how many possible categories and families of electronic health data we can use according to the HDS. EHR is only one category of this large spectrum of electronic health data. And we have so many different sources and so many different characteristics related to these different categories of data. But our goal should be to find the solution to merge this information. Let's think, for instance, how much different could be results from clinical trials, which are realized in a very controlled environment and which are based on something which is planned perfectly from the beginning into a clinical protocol, and compare this data just theoretically with, for instance, data from health applications, health hub, or medical devices, which are from real world, but they are so important to evaluate, for instance, what are the reactions of the patients. Let's think when the patient is called to follow a therapeutic plan, and how could be different the answer of the patient to the therapeutic adherence if you measure this adherence using medical device data and compare this data with the results from clinical trials. So this is just to give you an idea of the different information that are brought from different electronic health data. So let's think about real world data. Real world data are all the data which are collected routinely. So really different from those who are created in controlled environment. And these types of data are from electronic health records, patient-generated health data, registries regarding diseases, trauma, mortality, and so on, but also information regarding patient surveys. And we could use this data from many different applications, for many different uses that can bring a very important value for several purposes. For instance, for clinical research, let's think how we could use data from real world independently from the different categories that I mentioned, but that could be used as arms of randomized control trial, as external control. This is something that can give us an idea more clear of the impact of the reality in merging this data when we are evaluating the results of research. But also we can use data from real world for epidemiology. So we can develop populational studies. We can evaluate the burden of diseases and the pattern of treatments. So there are a lot of applications from this real world data, and also activities regarding the study of health economic research to evaluate if our healthcare services are performant and if we can improve somehow the results or the services that we are providing for the citizens. But we have another important emerging use of real world data, which is related to the training and testing and validation of AI in the healthcare sector. And when we refer to AI in the healthcare sector, we are referring to high-risk AI, where the information that these algorithms can use for providing informations to apply in the clinical practice or for the healthcare management are so important based on the quality and the relevance of the information that they received. So when we use real-world data in combination with data from randomized control trial to train our algorithms that will be applied in the healthcare sector or for the clinical practice, we can be more convinced that the results that we can achieve can reach a higher level of evidence. And so it is so important to invest in collecting this kind of information and in using them for the benefits of the innovation and the application of these technologies. However, there are several limitations and complexities related to the health electronic health records from real world and to the secondary use of health data. Even if the benefits are large, for instance, we can reach results concerning enabling time and cost efficiency when we use real world data in different use cases, as the development of a new drug to accelerate the process. But we have several limitations at the same time, because all data from the real world are observational, are unstructured, are incomplete and voluminous. This means that when you compare real-world data with randomized control trial data, which are the higher level of evidence in medical practice, we have to be aware that these are suboptimal types of data. This doesn't mean that we cannot use them. The contrary, we should use them, but we have to understand that we could reach variability in results, complexity during analysis, and inconsistencies between the entry sources. So we should manage the situation to solve this kind of problem, to reach the best results when we are going to use these data from the real world. And the benefits are really large, because we can use these large amounts of data to support the disease discoveries, to provide knowledge on patient outcomes, so consequently intervene to improve the quality and safety of care. And we can manage this important amount of information for the innovation of the healthcare system. So what are the minimum conditions that we should take into account to achieve the great impacts that we can, considering the limitations and the critical aspects related to real-world data and the secondary use of this data? First of all, we should create since the beginning good data models to reduce all the limitations within the use of this data. So mess, incompleteness, heterogeneity, errors and biases in the measures related to the inconsistency. Second, we should assess and ensure data quality And it is not a case that the European Health Data Space Regulation at Article 78 mentioned the need of having, where applicable, a label for quality and utility, exactly to facilitate a new approach, looking at reproducibility and replicability of these data. So also the idea of collecting this data, looking at the quality and utility of the datasets is very important for the best use of this data. And the third element is very important, and it is related to semantic interoperability. This is essential to enable the collection of the data from different sources, to merge this data, because this data shouldn't be collected and looking at only at the individual level. If we look at the secondary use of health data within the European health data space, we have to imagine that we are going and we are ready to collect several categories of data and datasets from different hospitals, and also when hospitals or other organizations, and also the HTABs, so health data access bodies, which are managing this data and which are called to allow the access and the use of this data when an applicant is requiring these. They should merge all the different categories and all the different sources, leaving the possibility to use this data in combination. So it is so important to have a common understanding of the meaning related to the different categories of data and data sets. And finally, we should use an approach allowing mapping data sets and their interpretation, because it is so important to have an alignment within the European Union and probably beyond in the future, when we are looking at how we can how we can collect the best results, the best information from all these different sources, all these different categories of data that we are ready to use in the secondary use. So that's all from my side. I hope that you could have the opportunity also to read the book, which is open access, so you can download very easily from the internet, as a starting point to improve and give your contributions to future research in the secondary use of health data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fidelia, for this enlightful introduction. And then it's a bit my turn to tell you a bit what we've been trying to do in studying 3 countries in Europe, namely Denmark, Belgium, and Finland, because those 3 countries are countries which try to implement some kind of what we used to call those only one strategies. So basically, only once, that means that authorities, but also sometimes the private sector, whoever takes initiative, tries to implement or to develop a strategy so that the data are captured once for all and can be reused for several purposes. We start from a situation where everybody is trying to build the best of the world in its own ecosystem. And as was already rightly mentioned by Fidelia, if we go on like that, we go to a dead end. So that means everybody needs to understand what the others need and why. That's really the basic starting point. So in those here, I will go very quickly with 3 examples. The first one was Denmark. And the approach from Denmark has been to be very much focused. So they didn't try to cover a wide spectrum, but they started with something which was directly in connection with the healthcare providers, healthcare professionals. So meaning they focused on benchmarking, which with just the capacity for them to evaluate better their practice and to collectively work on a collaborative knowledge. That was their starting point, and they even started with even something more focused, which was diabetes. And they slowly involved then in a discussion with each specialty. So each data set, which is supposed to improve knowledge, has been discussed with each specialty before being implemented. So they have been extending progressively to public health database and third-party applications with naturally adapted privacy modalities. They also had very limited semantic requirements, so basically mainly related to ICD-10 for coding diagnostics. And the specificity is that actually two initiatives has been taken place. One was public, one was private. The public one was targeted at specialists, while the private one was targeted at GPs. And actually there was no legal obligation to use this application, but legal obligations came only quite later. But we noticed that basically the application which has been posted has been widely accepted because it had limited ambitions and didn't add much workload, and there was a return of investment for the healthcare professional directly. So how did it work? It's pretty much the same system that those countries have been implemented. So basically that's an ETL process, an extraction process, directly implemented at the level of the EHR systems, which select the data, or when the data, for example, if you immediately have a diagnostic of diabetes, immediately you have the pop-up and then they collect the data. If the data are available in the EHR system, they are directly connected from there. If there are supplementary data not available, they can be filled manually. The data are stored locally and then exchanged with a central server available only for the practice. So what we learned here is that it has been pretty successful because they started with a calibration and a balanced return on investment and a mix of drivers. So basically, that helped the solution to be widely accepted and appropriated by the users. It also has been used as a first initiative, which led to other ones, as CAPRI and ISAP, for example, which are now being developed to support iterative research. We see here that industry has been playing a role, developing their own connector for all the GP softwares, and actually all the GP EHRs united to develop that and created a common product because they saw that as a very important competitive advantage. And they clearly saw that if they could collaboratively try to bridge primary and secondary use, that would help them to better sell their products. We also learned that in Denmark, they were quite advanced on a number of things, but one of the main obstacles they have is that they have a lot of national legacies and a lack of reference to international standards. So clearly for them, those formats will be a fantastic opportunity to upgrade those systems. So a very successful initiative, as you can see here now, which is covering still quite a wide spectrum because we see that we have the 28 national registers and the 18 quality registers, which are potentially fed by those applications. In Belgium, the situation is quite different because here, this objective only one strategy was already put forward in 2013 when the first ES roadmap was described, and that came from very much from the healthcare organization themselves, who told the authorities, come on, stop inventing new data collection process, we can't cope with it anymore. You need to establish system-to-system communication as the basic process for collecting data. And no more portal, no more physics. And you need to better align with what is being done in EHR systems. So that came from very much from the healthcare professionals themselves. And so the healthcare authority decided to have that action line implemented, which started with a full inventory of all the registers and documenting with the right metadata, and the reuse of communication protocols for the implement, and also the security components established at the national level, which have been then developed with public money and with this an application called HD4DP, which has been made available to all the healthcare organizations and implemented locally. So the objective is here to cover all registers, including registrants. The priorities for the time being are very much on infectious disease and on real-time monitoring, but as you can see, it's now concerning an increasing number of actors, labo, GP, nursing home, hospitals, and there will be a shift, a progress shift from a sentinel approach, where only a part of the actors are concerned, to universal coverage. So there has been also in Belgium quite a number of money invested in a number of resources, in particular in KSATs, and in creating a SNOMED City Belgian subset, together with also the compulsory use of login codes for labs, for example. Same system, basically with some differences, but you can see here the role of the Health Data Agency for Belgium, which is now the official agency for secondary use of data, but which allows just which we see using the central security components and the H4GP component here, which extract data directly from the HR systems for already. This system is already used by more than 40 different registers, which are sometimes very specific, sometimes broader. What is interesting to see here is that you have also health data for researcher, which is not there, which allows to have a direct communication to ensure the data quality and data consistency. So there is a possibility of interaction between the researcher and the data provider. What we learned here is that some of the lessons learned is that semantic issue is, of course, a major issue and a major requirements. And for that, we need the right tools. So official terminology servers, which provide the right resources and the capacity to map national legacies with international standards is really important. And there is a shift which needs to take place at the level of healthcare organization, improving human and technical resources, for example. It's also important that we don't start with a system which is generic, but we still accept that many other systems remain in place. Then clearly the return on investment is not perceived positively by the actors. So you need to have a unified data entry system for secondary use and not several applications competing, making the life of people even more complex. And then finally, here again, a big claim to have international standards more aligned between primary use and secondary use and implemented in daily life. And finally, the third example we just wanted to show to you is Finland. And Finland is probably the example in Europe of the most integrated ecosystem where data produced for primary use are per default, I would say, used for secondary use. So we might expect here just that basically there is not a need necessary to develop specific connectors and so on. And you can see here, there are quite a large number of data which are being collected by the Kanta services. And for secondary use data, the connection is pretty straightforward, I would say. Nevertheless, we learned that it's still not necessarily perceived as an ideal solution, although they have a very advanced legislation and a very good underlying infrastructure. The key question here from physicians and researchers is that the data collected are not sufficiently structured and validated, I would say. And basically, and not surprisingly, the healthcare professional has still difficulty to express themselves with structured data codes sometimes. So there is here clearly a need to work on usability so that they can still feel free to express themselves, but still end up with coded data. And clearly, they were also requesting more return on investment, in particular in terms of analytics, to increase the motivation for physicians to work on the data quality. And finally, the system to access data, it's maybe a side issue, but it was seen as a major issue in Finland. Requesting data permits is costly both in time and money. So it's an important also element. So very shortly, the summary of lessons learned across those 3 countries for us is that we need multiple drivers, not only working on one. We need to have quite a number of things accomplished if we want to really have results in terms of verification of data. We need major investment in usability tools. That means that the resources that need to be created, but also the technology, the technology should be used in order for data to be coded without the users to know even that it's coded. I'm exaggerating, but it means that it really has to be effortless, at least as effortless as possible. Only one should only be only one. So if you implement a strategy to collect data from the source, you really need not to multiply the systems which increase constraints for the users. There must be a return on investment for the people who produce the data. Legacies still remain and will remain a burden for a while, but EHDS is a very powerful game changer. And finally, public and private initiative might be competing. It might be an issue in some countries. It might be an advantage in other countries. So it's there is no strict opinion on this. So just to finish, we also learned that today, when discussing aligning standards, all models created for each domain experience at some stage scalability issue. And so clearly we are facing a trend towards hybrid approaches where all major models, not all of them, but all major ones are supported with data submitted the model most suitable for the data producer. But this demands greater efforts in alignment. And just as I mentioned, the necessity to consider the requirements of the other domains. Also, the hybrid approaches require adapted technology and tools and investment in data management human competencies, which are not yet sufficiently available. We also see that the metadata, which are now proposed by the EHDS under, for example, TEDAS2 joint action, is a very interesting baseline, but clearly more alignment is needed at the data level if you want to achieve impact. And finally, the use of tools like terminology servers, which ideally could be interconnected, could play a major role in dealing with legacies and supporting alignment. So that's what I wanted to share with you. We will have the 3 reports, which we can find much more details on what has been done by those 3 countries available and made available to you as a proceeding of this webinar. So you understand better what has been achieved and where to find complementary information. So I would like now to pass the floor to Rebecca and Becky from CDISC, who have been, as I already said in the introduction, working on a very important piece of work, is trying to see how we can use the patient summary, and because Rebecca and Becky are American ladies, we're looking even beyond Europe, we're looking at the international level, how the international patient summary can be used as a very powerful base to support clinical research and public health, and which data are really key in order to make that possible. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm going to start with this slide that shows the points that we're going to go through, but it's really an outline of what Rebecca and I plan to cover today. And I won't read them to you. There will be a summary at the end of our presentation. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And I'd like to just give a little bit of background and go back in history. And it's about 15 years ago, we started working on talking about learning health systems. And learning health systems are those that take healthcare data and use it for research. And in terms of research, that could mean public health, it could mean a number of different kinds of research. And those research findings then are used to inform healthcare decisions. So research relies on healthcare data, and it also informs clinical decisions. So if you could go to the next slide. CDISC in 2010, through its Healthcare Link initiative and an eSource data interchange project that we did with regulators in Europe and the US, and the IMI EHR for CR project, was working on ways to integrate electronic health record workflow with secondary use cases. And these included public health, safety, clinical research, and quality. And if you could just go to the next slide, Rebecca, and this is a build slide, so I'm just going to talk through it. But leveraging the standards at the time, Health Level 7 and CDISC, we did what Luke was describing, and we tried to do this integration so that not only do you collect the data once and use it for multiple purposes, but we wanted to eliminate the re-entry. So at the time, everybody was taking EHR data and re-entering it into another computer for clinical research. And so we wanted to eliminate that. And we took the HL7 clinical document architecture standard, because FHIR wasn't in existence at that time, and the CDISC standards, and we developed what we called interoperability specifications with the National Standards Institute. And then collaborating with Integrating the Healthcare Enterprise, IHE, we developed integration profiles that used HL7 and CDISC standards. And the first one was called Retrieve Form for Data Capture, or RFD. And this, the idea was that the data from the EHR would populate portions of the form and automate that population. So this was actually demonstrated in interoperability showcases at HIMSS. It was done with H1N1 outbreak for the CDC for biosurveillance and public health. It was done also, it was implemented in Hamamatsu in Japan and in Georges Pompidou and also King's College in Europe. So those were all implementations of RFD. And one in particular, the ASTER project with Harvard working with Pfizer, it took an adverse event report, which took 34 minutes to fill out a form and fax it to a regulator. It became a less than 1 minute process. So clearly the ROI was there. So next slide, Rebecca, and this is my last slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to talk about what we're doing with XShare. But from 2008 to 2014, the IHE CDISC collaboration created integration profiles that I talked about. RFD was one of them. Retrieve Protocol for Execution was another one. And these were used globally and displayed at showcases and done in different settings around the world. So why wasn't it adopted? And your guess is as good as ours. These are some of my thoughts. But in 2014, HL7 formally agreed to introduce HL7 FHIR. So people weren't using CDA as much or not focusing on using it. And the US turned their HIT standards program, and it was replaced with the HITECH Act, and we were going to develop a blue button, but it hasn't been broadly adopted. The US is still working on that. And as we said, there are links with what we're doing in XShare with the yellow button. but terminologies were not aligned within healthcare. Sometimes there were different implementations, even within the same EHR in different locations and across implementation guides and amongst healthcare and public health and clinical research. And we did not align terminologies to get the semantic interoperability that Fidelia talked about. And maybe the regulators in industry weren't ready. I don't know. But why we think we could succeed now with XShare, the EHDS, as you heard, is committed to having people use the EHR exchange format to support secondary use cases. There are a number of different SDOs working together, very nicely together, HL7, IHE, CDISC, IHTSDO, which is SNOMED, SEN, ISO, all working together as partners in the consortium. Terminologies are being aligned and harmonized within the IPS and for the IPS Plus, which Rebecca's going to explain to you. And patients will be able to access their own health data with the yellow button, which removes some of the issues with informed consent. So I'm turning it over to Rebecca now because she's the technical expert on this, and you can take it from here.
All right, hello everyone. So we're working towards sharing data with XShare yellow button with the patient at the center, and that's the key. Being able to push a yellow button, the patient can for healthcare, public health, and clinical research. And it's all supported, as Becky pointed out, by 6 standards development organizations within the XShare project. And the XShare project has 3 different levers. We have the standards, we have the regulation, and then we have the industry, all working towards having the vision where everyone can have their health data and share it with a click of a button. Now I'm going to go over what we've done, what we're doing, and where we're going with the work that we're doing for XShare. Our first objective was to have a harmonized core data element set that would support healthcare, population health, and clinical research for Europe, but we hope it spreads globally in the alignment. And CDISC standards are global, SNOMED standards are global, so we're looking for a broad vision. Then we collected a number of use cases and settled on 3, the first being to support case report form completion with EHR data, which is similar to the work that was done back in 2010 with the IHE and CDISC collaboration. The second is patients self-nominating for a research study, sending data with the yellow button. Third, protocol feasibility via a registry. So the patients send their IPS summaries to this registry to then be able to determine if the site has enough patients. And now for what we're working on, which is the good stuff with the IPS Plus, is this proposed interoperability specification for the International Patient Summary that supports research and public health, and it is mapped to international standards. Moving forward in the future, which is what makes hopefully the adoption much greater chance, is we're going to iterate and then get implementer feedback and then refine this specification and make it easier for implementers to adopt. So where we started was we took the HL7 FHIR IPS, and in the middle there you can see the chart of the IPS composition, and that is from the HL7 FHIR specification. And we compared it with the CDISC case report forms for research and public health. And we prioritized in the same fashion that the IPS prioritized, not considering the research scope that's on the right for this particular iteration. We took all the different data element sources. We used all the different IPS specifications, which are designed for different reasons, the IHE IPS, the ISO IPS, the European one. We took data elements from IHD's EHR for CR, the EHR to EDC, as well as the population health information research infrastructure effort for public health. We looked at all of those data elements and came up with a 100 core set. And then we have recently done some terminology harmonization. You've heard from the last presentations, the importance of that semantic interoperability in the ability to share and reuse data. And now we're going to hopefully put the specifications to test with use cases. And this is the core set of data elements. In CDISC, we have domains, and that's equivalent to the IPS categories. And the black data elements are the new concepts. So it's essentially the research subject identifier, the research study identifier, and then the healthcare encounters. Now, if you look behind on that right-handed top purple box, there are adverse events, and we have them grayed because in healthcare, those will show up as conditions, new conditions or new allergies. So we didn't feel like that was something to highlight. And this is the core harmonized data element sets that we proposed, and you can see the headers there on the top. And for this iteration, what we did was we took the NCI thesaurus, the NIH NCI thesaurus, the C code, which is connected to the CDISC variables and the CDISC data elements for clinical research used globally in randomized controlled trials, and connected that to the SNOMED code question. And that is a connector to the data elements. And then we also did more work on connecting the models. So what the implementers will do, and this is the plan, is they can take the HL7 FHIR International Patient Summary as this starting point, and then take the guidance in the IPS Plus to then use that data for secondary use. There's also another implementation guide produced by XShare, and that's surrounding the technological pieces around the yellow button. And we have a toolkit within the IPS Plus and guidance on how to use that. So we see the terminologies as a potential glide path between the IPS and the IPS Plus, giving the patient the ability to opt in for their data sharing, whether it's healthcare or clinical research, with the push of the button using the terminologies to connect the two worlds and globally. And we looked at also the US work on their data elements as well. Now, what is in this toolbox? We have the core harmonized data elements that I showed you, as well as maps from the FHIR specification to the CDISC model, and then value set alignment for routine labs, the labs that are done in healthcare and clinical research, your hemoglobin, your hematocrit, your chemistry labs. Each one of those was aligned between SNOMED and CDISC, as well as several microbiology tests to supplement or support public health. There's information about what could trigger the IPS Plus in a technological fashion, and guidance for the IPS Plus for research, pointing to where in the IPS you'll find more information, as well as the FHIR IG. And then sources, there is a rich treasure trove of implementations guides across the FHIR community globally, and we point to the different guides that can help support this use case. And CDISC is equally amount of rich documents and specifications to support clinical research from beginning to end, and we point you to the direction of that content on the CDISC website as well. Speaking of CDISC, we have several clinical research therapeutic area user guides, and they support public health as well. And I've listed them for you on the screen. There's been a lot of work with infectious disease, chronic disease, and these have example case report forms, example tables, and then we have an eCRF portal that has the packages in machine readable content. This is an example of a case where the standards are working together. If you recall, during COVID, everyone had an app, and this is an example of public health with the Global Innovation for Public Health Transformation, working with SEN and others in the EU. It had been done before, so we had data elements from Ebola, H1N1, so it happened quickly. On the right, there's the list of the data elements that were used. In the middle is the different standards that were leveraged. We used the proper standard for its use case to design this specification. So thus CDISC and the learning health community leveraged the specs for the use cases, using the right standard at the right time. Thus, we propose XShare as the missing piece of the puzzle, connecting the CDISC initiatives to healthcare, connecting randomized clinical trials to healthcare real-world data. With the IPS Plus and the toolkit there, you have connection from healthcare to research, and then the CDISC initiatives below, each one of those: digital data flow, biomedical concepts, 360i, those are all CDISC initiatives that support expanding and enabling standards-driven automation across end-to-end study information lifecycle, from the study design through the results. And the C code, that biomedical concept, connects to the NCI thesaurus code that was on that data element, harmonization of that core set, serving as the connector. So in summary, the IPS Plus proposes just adding a small number of data elements to the IPS for use cases in clinical research and public health. The IPS Plus implementation and adoption will support learning health systems such that research data can inform clinical decisions. No new standards are necessary, no new data models. We just need to be able to use the tools, align, harmonize, and connect healthcare with research and public health. There's opportunity with the IHE CDISC integration profile that could be updated using FHIR. And finally, the XShare consortium can encourage and support widespread implementation and adoption for the benefits of patients.
Thank you very much for the extensive presentation. I hope everybody will have understood that we have now really tremendous opportunities to exploit, and it's time to move ahead. And it's time to give the word also to Eugenia. We are a little bit late, but I think it's going to be fine. So Eugenia has been leading the work in XShare on the priority use cases and trying to define the core data set and to see how we could better align with them. So Eugenia, please.
So I'm Eugenia Rinaldi. I work at the core unit Digital Medicine and Interoperability at the Berlin Institute of Health at Charité in Berlin, Germany. And of course, I work with Luke in XShare and the work package for public health and cross-border health threats. And we have been also in contact, of course, and work together and collaborating with Rebecca and Becky for the IPS. Okay, so it has been said before that the European health data space has identified some priority areas, such as we've heard before, like 5 or 6 areas, according to how we organize it. And within these areas, we have identified some use cases within our work package where we think would largely benefit from the use of a European standard format. So we can see here a list of them. So they concern infection surveillance, antimicrobial resistance, One Health approach, so across disciplines, for example, across animal health and human health, and cancer monitoring, care plan, vaccination, long COVID, and antibiotic prescription and administration. So some of the use cases, I will go a little bit into details. Some others I will not even mention because it would take too long. But I think that what is very important is what we want to express is that if the information is the same, used for research and public health is the same as the one that is collected at primary care, then this format should also be the same. And through the European Health Data Space and the European format, that is going to be possible. So we know, I mean, we've heard this before, but repetita iuvant, as the Latins say. So we want the data entered once at source can be available also for secondary use. Of course, if necessary, provided that the patient, the consent from the patient is obtained, and of course that data privacy and protection rules are also observed. Why do we want? What are the final advantages of these? Well, if we can use the same format from primary care to secondary use, we can enable real-time monitoring, or at least near real-time monitoring. We can simplify administration by decreasing the burden of redundant data entry or time-consuming data transformations. And we can support disease and infection surveillance across countries. And we can also, by having the same format, even sharing analysis algorithms and enable federated systems, for example, for applying analysis, by so doing also including hospitals that maybe do not have the competence within themselves, but having the structured data, they can take advantage of of algorithms that are developed elsewhere. And of course, data is available because you don't need transformation. It's already there, and the quality also is does not decrease, because if you do not need error-prone data transformations, of course, the quality of data stays the same, and that's very important. We can support this One Health approach across disciplines, so the data format stays the same also across different disciplines. We've seen the example of laboratories, of veterinary laboratories and human health laboratories, and of course for infection, which often derive from animal infections. This is very important. And very importantly, also the patient empowerment. So patients that become active in managing their data. So I will start with with 3 use cases that we have identified within Work Package 4, and which aim at administrative simplification and real-time monitoring or near real-time monitoring. And these are the European Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance Network Protocol, the protocol for the surveillance of healthcare-associated infections and prevention indicator in European intensive care units. And these are networks coordinated by the ECDC. And these are, of course, very important data collections that are already taking place at European level. And the use case 3 is about cancer monitoring at European level. So data is collected at European level from cancer registries and is entered in a European system, cancer information system. And also here we have a data set that was provided by the European Network of Cancer Registries. And again, it's a European data set. It's an ongoing data collection that of data coming from different countries. So these data can be standardized. These are examples of data that can be standardized already from the source, and that should be included in the specifications of the European Health Data Space and the European format. Information with the same format can be used at national level to monitor and prevent such infections, but also at European level by the ECDC. So again, information can be the same and can have the same format. And not only that, but actually the information that is collected at European level it's very important that is included in the specifications of the European exchange format. So, so we're talking about also cancer monitoring, and there is a European data set at the European level of information collected that should be standardized already at healthcare providers level, and it can be the same at national level and European level for monitoring, and to enable monitoring without delay and without data transformation and decreasing of data quality. So what we did with these data sets, which are, I'm just going to repeat it. These are European data collections that are already ongoing. So established data sets that are already ongoing, which right now need several transformations before they can, I mean, they are in all different formats before they get collected. And of course, it'd be nice to achieve that standard is used already in primary care, and it goes all the way through national and European level. So what we did was look at of course, match these information with what has been prioritized by the European Health Data Space. We looked at the possible ways to standardize the terminology, the semantic of course, the semantic interoperability and define the terminology with SNOMED and LOIC for such variables. We looked at what was already developed by HL7 Europe as data models and implementation guides, and of course, at possible HL7 FHIR data models. So this is an example. This is a list of variables taken from the antimicrobial resistance protocol by ECDC. And we can see here that we have in the first column, we have the variables. And in the fourth column, we have a possible mapping to FHIR, but then also for these variables, but then also the mapping to value sets with terminologies that univocally identify all these, in this case, microorganisms. This is a list of microorganisms that is whose information is collected within this data protocol. And of course, we want each of these microorganisms to be identified univocally, not only both across Europe and also from primary care to secondary use, to public health and to research. So by introducing semantic interoperability, we can obtain this unified meaning of these codes and reduce ambiguity. Another thing that we did with these three data sets was to also provide the metadata. Luc mentioned that the EHDS also focuses on the development of national and EU data set catalogs. And there is this new Health Ticket app metadata schema that is being developed specific for healthcare data sets. And so we started also with we started doing this for these three data sets. And of course, the idea would be so that the data sets are defined in a standardized way and are more easily retrievable and findable. And now I will move to the second part of the use cases. So we've seen these established data set use cases, and now I will focus on a couple of use cases where the patient is more central and more active, and the yellow button is involved. We've heard before about the yellow button. The yellow button is this button that enables citizens to share their data with just one click and exercise their data portability rights, of course, under GDPR. And this was really the vision of the XShare project. And we have, we think that within the public health space, the click of the button can really establish a connection between the public health and citizens, so that, for example, citizens that meet certain criteria can be asked to participate to projects where maybe that maybe aim at knowledge creation. And we have here the example of long COVID. We know that long COVID is a condition that has a very broad definition. It embraces several symptoms, several conditions, and it still needs to be studied and a lot of information still needs to be collected. And we think that through patient discovery and a possibility of all citizens at this point. So, of course, that means a lot of information. If they accept, of course, then they can share additional data and enrich public health knowledge about long COVID. I'll move to the next use case, and it's the last use case that I would like to present to you today, which is also a different way of using the yellow button and of making patients actively part of this European health data space and also take advantage of it by using the yellow button, for example, for cancer survivors to produce a survivorship passport, which is a document containing their care plan, taking data from cancer registry and healthcare provider and checking it against the international guidelines, updated international guidelines, and producing a document that can support the care plan of patients, and maybe also across countries, hopefully also across countries, but also as a reminder of what they can do, or updated to the latest guidelines. So, and of course, this use case focuses on patient empowerment, on patient possibility of using to their the European standard format of health data for their own good and their own health directly. So in conclusion, I will just summarize what the use cases that I've been briefly describing. We've seen the ones where we are supporting ongoing data collections, facilitating only one strategy. So we want to enable through the European format cross-border monitoring and surveillance, and make it really efficient, enable also real-time monitoring and reduce administrative burden. We also want to make sure that the data that is collected by these three important initiatives is included in the specifications of the European format. Then we also looked at a couple of examples which focus on more prospective uses of the yellow button, because it's about patient discovery by public health agencies and possibility of knowledge creation. So creating new knowledge by contacting and asking for patients' contribution directly, so that patients with a click of a button can decide whether they want to share their data for a specific initiative. And of course, this all the patient empowerment is central to all of this. And through this, we believe that patients also get their control of their own data and decide when to share their data. And hopefully, this is also one of the reasons why they can also better participate to contribute even to a further extent to public health by sharing their own data.